Good afternoon. My name is Raquel Mariscal. I am a senior consultant and a member of the JDAI management team. It's been great to see old friends and make new ones. Thank you so much for being here and for all the work that you do. And again, I want to thank you for being here. At the end of the day, you've been hanging in there. I've walked around the workshops. They've been engaging. You've been engaged. All good stuff. At these conferences, we have a custom of featuring the successes of the host site. What was, what has changed, and how the change came about. As you heard last night, Harris County has been replicating JDAI since 2007. Since then, stakeholders, both system and community, have intentionally and collectively demonstrated multi-level leadership and will necessary to achieve the results that they will share with you momentarily. In addition to the stakeholders that you see sitting here, as Tom said yesterday evening, there are many, numerous more. But there's one in particular that I want to give a shout out to because he is not able to be here and just sends his regrets, and that's Judge Emmett, the County Executive Officer, for his will, leadership, and support from the executive branch to continue to support reform here in Harris County. And personally, it's been a privilege for me as a member of the initiative management team to have been assigned to work with Harris County. So, I can say I knew them back when. I am now going to hand it over to Nancy Baird. Nancy Baird started her career as a probation officer here in Harris County. She is currently, and a native Houstonian, is that right?
Yes.
A native of Houston, knows just about everybody in Harris County. She is currently the Director of HR at CathExis Oil and Gas, but most notably, she is the local coordinator extraordinaire. So I'm going to hand it over to you, to Nancy, to introduce the rest of the panel. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you. Yes, I am Nancy Baird, and I am the Harris County Site Coordinator. And I wanted to start this by just obviously, I think you've been welcomed well enough to Houston. And Raquel said something briefly, but truly none of this really would have happened if it hadn't have been Harris County Judge Ed Emmett's, foresight and courage to say, let's try it. Let's see what we can do. And our panel is going to talk about where we were especially and where we have been and then where we are and where we're going. But I think sometimes people forget how big Houston and Harris County is. We're 4.18 million people. The racial breakdown, as you can see, is 38% Anglo, 19% African American, 38% Latino, 5% Asian. When you look at youth age 10 to, or youths, as my cousin Vinny, age 10 to 17, 25% Anglo, 21% African American, 48% Latino, and then 6% other. We are 1,703 square miles. So when you think of Houston, we're completely flat. Part of Houston is under sea level. So we're kind of like a great big cow patty, just flat, and we go on forever and ever and ever. When Tom takes, what's his name tomorrow? Rick. Yeah. Rick, to see our facilities, in a day, you're going to be driving over 100 miles just to get to all the facilities because we are so spread out. So when you talk about in Houston we don't really believe in mass transit. Don't ask me why. We believe in cars, and we believe in burning a lot of gas. I work in the oil and gas industry, so I'm really glad about that. But we believe in cars, so it's very hard to get to places and to have kids get to us and us get to them. There's a lot of just geographic difficulties. We are the third largest city in the United States. We are, when you talk about what comes into juvenile probation, we have 41 incorporated, and I want to say third largest county, 41 incorporated cities in Harris County. So we have all these cities we are having to work with. 130 law enforcement agencies. It's incomprehensible the extent of how we have to do our work. Harris County JDAI is all other JDAIs, except we call them task forces, because I very much believe in that everything should be a task. I'm the most anti-committee person on earth. I think committees are usually just absolutely ridiculous. What you do is sit around and talk about nothing. So we have task forces so that people know if you're involved in this, there are tasks to be done and we need to move on. So we have very obvious, because of the core strategies of JDAI, risk assessment, self-inspection, alternatives, case processing, DMC, special detention, and then we added Youth Advisory Council. Harris County's been really, I think, and from what I did not know, but what I've heard from John Rhodes and Raquel is that we are unique because we have all these stakeholders. We have all these folks in the community involved, and it's not just a juvenile probation initiative. I think most JDAI sites is juvenile probation. And so some of the things that people are going to talk about up on the panel is how we got everyone to come to the table and get involved. So that's really my spiel, and what I'm going to do is now moderate, try to watch the clock. And the first person I'm going to introduce is the hero of all this in my mind, and that's Tom Brooks, because he's the one who said we can do it and just doesn't say no, says let's try it, let's see if it'll work. Why won't it work? Why can't we just try it? So Tom Brooks is going to kind of give an overview of how it started and where we were and where we're going. Oh, and he's the executive director, y'all know this, the chief probation officer in Harris County.
I'm back. But I only got 8 minutes, so I got to talk real fast. No jokes. Let me give you a little bit about the history of Harris County. 2006, we were at a facility on West Dallas with a detention bed count of 144. We then moved downtown to the Juvenile Justice Complex, where we increased to 210 beds. This is in 2006. Our average daily population in 2006 was 277. That means we had 210 beds, we were putting 277 kids in them and or on the floor. So that wasn't going to work. So I did what most people who thought they were intelligent would do, is I started saying we need to build more beds. We need another detention center. So what I did is I said, well, let me look at around the country and start comparing us to them, to what Chicago has, to what LA has, to what Phoenix has, to what Atlanta has. And basically, I came up with a formula that we should have had over 400 beds. So we took that to Commissioner's Court, said we need 400 beds to keep up with the amount of kids that we have, being brought in our detention center. So they started researching. They started looking. Are we going to build a new facility? Do we renovate the old jail? What are we going to do? Well, in the meantime, we looked up to the northeast, be that way. And in comes riding in is Bart Lubau and his posse, Raquel, John Rhodes, and Judge Tommy Jewell. I'm not sure if it was a white horse or a yellow cab, though, actually. But anyways, they arrived, and they showed us the pathway. They came in, the folks, they did an assessment of our whole county, basically, judicial system. And we actually thought going in that, okay, let's let them do this. We'll give them some good ideas when they ride back out of town. Well, they came up with a lot of good suggestions, a lot of what they call low-hanging fruit, which we needed to start working on. So of course, Commissioner's Court and the county judge says, yeah, let's give this 100% effort. So it was basically turned over to me. I wasn't the director at that time, but I was told make this work. So I did do something smart. I brought in Nancy Baird, who's the most dynamic person, who I knew had the heart, who I knew wouldn't let me just sit down in my chair, and we would get it going. So we sat down and talked and said, how are we going to do this? Well, first of all, let's be as transparent as we can. We know what we have. We read the report. There's changes that we need to make. And as we make them changes, let's make sure that we let everybody know what we're doing and that everybody can see that we're doing it and it's not just verbiage. The second thing we decided is we need to invite the community in. It's always been probation, law enforcement, and the courts, and then the community. And we knew in order to be successful, and keep our kids in the community, we needed their help. There's no doubt about it. That wasn't anything that was negotiable. If we were going to make it work in Harris County, we had to do that. So Nancy, with her influence, started bringing all the powers that be to the table. I'm talking about judges, prosecutors, chief of police, community stakeholders, MHMRA director, everybody that was able to make a policy change. Commissioners also. We also had commissioner on the executive steering committee. So we all sat down and became transparent. What we also decided as we put our task forces together is we weren't going to make sure that we involved the community and as many people other than juvenile probation as we could, because as Nancy said, it's not a juvenile probation initiative, it's going to be a Harris County initiative. So we don't take the blame if it doesn't work. No, I'm just kidding. We knew that it was going to work that way. So we started our task forces. And one of the first task forces that we did, of course, we came up with a detention risk assessment instrument, which Tim will talk about here in a couple of minutes. But one thing I want to highlight is our detention self-inspection that we did. We knew we had a lot of areas of concern in our detention. When we moved in, it used to be the old criminal jail / courts, and it wasn't designed the way we wanted it to. It didn't have the physical makeup of, it didn't have classrooms. Some things that we knew we couldn't change, but we wanted an outside perspective. So that particular committee, I believe, had about 20 folks on it initially, and I believe only 6 were juvenile probation. And of course, you have to have some juvenile probation to, explain the system and where we're at in that. But I remember one of the questions that came to me from the co-chairs was, there's this guy named Will Harrell, who was a TYC ombudsman, who asked about, he's sitting down there, who asked about coming in and being part of this. And of course, his job through the state was to look at all the TYC facilities and find out what's wrong and all that. So it could make somebody a little nervous. But again, since we're transparent, bring in Will. And he came in and they put together a super report. It wasn't an overnight report. I mean, they hit every aspect of the detention center they could. And what we ended up with a lot of good suggestions and a lot of low-hanging fruit that we could take care of, like establishing programs and just forms in Spanish. We had so much low-hanging fruit. We made some serious good juice out of that, let me tell you. And to go a step further, we didn't have air conditioning, and our gym was up on the roof. And y'all think it's warm now. You should stay here for the summertime. It gets really hot in Houston. Kids wouldn't be able to use a recreation gym for usually 30 to 40 days out of the year. And we had nothing else. So out of that, we're able to, as we started to save money, Commissioners Court agreed to enclose that gymnasium and put air conditioning in it. So now kids can use it every day. So those little savings that we're able to do by starting to reduce our numbers on the back end is a big deal to us. We're investing a lot more than we ever have on the front end. Using, as we talked about last night, the TYC, or TJD diversion funds. We're using those on front-end programs. And, am I about out of time? Am I about out of time?
No, you have another minute.
I got another minute? Okay. Because I got to think of something smart to say. Let me finalize this with talking, because they're going to talk about some of the changes. A lot of the stuff's going to be on the screen. I don't want to throw a bunch of numbers. I want to do the general overview and again say I've made a lot of friends that I never had by bringing the community into this. Even as these folks will talk, but we've expanded to so many areas in Harris County, especially in the faith-based areas with different collaborations. Providing after-school activities, working on particular, like our gang kids, just focusing on the individual needs of the kids. It's been very successful. We continue to grow. 2 of the major churches right now in Harris County have come together, and Commissioners Court is, very much behind it. As a matter of fact, I had a meeting a couple weeks ago with one of our commissioners about one of our gymnasiums, which I've been trying to attach to one of our secure facilities, hadn't been able to do. He picked up the phone, and they're starting to demolish it next week and build a new one. Because he said, Tom, y'all have saved us a lot of money. You return money at the end of the year. We need to do something for the kids. And that's what it's all about, and that's what we've been very successful at. I'm going to turn this over to Tim Broussard, who's going to talk about our detention risk assessment.
And Tim, tell them we understand they can't read it. We get that. We know they can't read it. It's not for them to read, it's just a visual.
Do not attempt to read this on the screen. It will only make your eyes go bad. Good afternoon, everyone. They say that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And that's the best thing that I can say about the way that we made detention decisions before our involvement with JDAI. We thought we were doing the right thing. It's sort of sad to say, but we looked upon detention as a good thing for kids. Remember, we're Texas. We're Harris County, Texas. So we had some cultural and systemic things that made this more likely for us. We underwent a lot of trouble in the late 80s, the early 90s when crack cocaine hit this community, tore it asunder. We got tough on crime, which meant locking more kids up. It wasn't until we began to examine the way that we made decisions that we realized how crazy they were. We used to detain children if they committed an offense and caused more than $5,000 worth of damage. No one can remember where that came from, but it was held fast to. We would detain any child charged with arson, whether he or she burned down this whole room with all of us in it or started a fire in a trash can. If a child was a Texas Youth Commission parolee and came in on a new offense, whether it was criminal trespass or evading arrest or murder, we detained them because they had already been to state school. I have detained children because they pissed me off, because they failed to appreciate the seriousness of what they had done to bring them to us, because they cursed their parents in my presence. As I said, we sort of treated detention like it was good for kids. We know much differently now. Even still, well, and that's what led us, almost 6 years ago to the day, in April of 2006, we moved, as Tom said, from our offices at West Dallas downtown. We brought 282 children with us in vans, took us all day, to, as Tom pointed out, a 210-bed facility. So from the time we got there, we were overcrowded. Even still, in spite of all that, as Tom pointed out, when JDAI came to town, I remember telling colleagues, you know, they're going to come in, they're going to look at all we do, and they're going to say, look, we need just to move on. These folks have it down. They don't need our help. Let's go somewhere where they're not doing it right. That's not what they said, thank God. They said, look at this. You detain this kid for that? You detain every child that comes in on a violation of probation and you don't send him home? So we began to look at it, and I'll now tell the story about my first encounter with the illustrious Mr. Liebow. Lubow. I got the bow right and got the Lou wrong. Excuse me. In the fall of 2007, we had our first mass meeting with members of JDAI. I, at the time, was the administrator of intake screening, been a probation officer for 27 years. And as I heard Bart talking about this risk assessment instrument, I'm sitting there going, this just can't be. And I'm formulating in my mind a question that I feel will just bring him to his knees whenever he finishes his presentation. And he will throw up his hands and say, you know, you're right. So I spent a lot of time on this question, and Bart finished talking. And I said, do you mean to tell me that you want a piece of paper to make a detention decision rather than relying on the skill and knowledge of an experienced, seasoned probation officer who's gathered information through an exhaustive interview with parents and a child? Far from saying, I throw up my hands, Bart said, that's exactly what I'm telling you. That seasoned, experienced probation officer you're talking about has a host of biases that play into how he or she is going to make their decision. And this is one of the ways that you can control for that. I sat down chastened because he did not turn tail and run. He basically held stiff to his guns and made me start thinking. A week later, my boss called me into his office and said, Tim, since you're so concerned about the efficacy of an instrument to make detention decisions, congratulations. You are the co-chair of the Risk Assessment Instrument Committee. So I began that work along with 19 other people from the community, from the probation department. We met for 6 months and we talked about detention decisions, how we made them. And it was in that process that we began to see how foolish we were. Once we worked out our definition of detention, we crafted the instrument to fit that definition, and we let it loose. January 31st of 2009, we began use of the instrument. To say that staff were joyous would be wrong. To say that they were accepting of it would be wrong. To say that they probably called me names I would prefer not to share with you would be correct. Because I changed from the guy who said, lock them up, to the guy who said, let them go. They score a 12. They score a 9. I don't care if they're not going to school. I don't care if they're not coming home at night. It's not our problem as a detention setting to take care of those issues. I remember being in Multnomah County, and they were well ahead of us, of course, and they were identifying a guy who was the person who made detention decisions. And I was thinking, oh no, that's going to be me. I'm going to be that guy. And I have been that guy. And I can tell you it's the best thing that's happened in my career because it has allowed us finally to be objective about our decisions, to move away from subjective statements about children, about their histories, about their past, and allow those kinds of things to influence what we say and do about children. We're 3 years into it now. Our detention population today, in a bad month, I don't know for you guys, but April and May are our worst months, is 190, roughly 100 less, almost 100 less than we detained 5-6 years ago. We rarely override. We keep our overrides within the suggested parameters. The instrument has changed the way that we do business, and it's allowed us to provide better services, to detain the right kid, again, for the right reason, and it has made a sea change in the way that we look at the use of detention. I think that it's been the best thing in my career, though I was one of the more resistant people to begin with, and I see how effective it has been. For those of you who are looking into this, you're going to be resistant. You're going to wonder how it works. All I can say is that it does. Spend the time, spend the effort, you'll reap the rewards. Thank you.
Come on, Mr. Leslie. I forgot to introduce Tim Broussard. He's the Deputy Director of Intake Court Services at Harris County Juvenile Probation. Now I would like to introduce... You mean, oh, thank you, Leslie. Tim Broussard is at the end. Next to him is Tarsha Jackson, who is the state director of the Parents and Families of Incarcerated Youth and the SCORES Fellow and the Genius. Next to her is Sylvia Latapy, who is a juvenile probation trainer, and she is the co-chair, Tim's co-chair of risk assessment, Tarsha's co-chair of the DMC, Sylvia Latapy is the co-chair of the Youth Advisory Council, Leslie Smith is on our Management Oversight Committee, been involved from the very beginning. He is the founder and the CEO of a community organization called Change Happens. Next to him is Judge Michael Schneider, who is the judge in the 315th District Court. He's on our executive steering committee. And the thing I didn't say about when I talked about Harris County, I think we went to some county and they were talking about their 15, and it was something like maybe Albuquerque, which isn't quite as big as Houston, and they were talking about their 15 judges. In Harris County, we have 3 judges and 3 associate judges who handle all delinquency and abuse and neglect. 3. And 3 associates, so they're absolutely overwhelmed. Judge Schneider's been with us since the very beginning, and then Tom Brooks. So that's it. Next will be Leslie Smith, who CEO, founder of Change Happens, one of our community partners.
I'd like to say good evening. All right, she didn't say, did you say I was a preacher too?
Sorry.
Okay, I'm a preacher. So, in our church, we like to hear some, response. Okay, good evening. All right, okay, now let the church say amen. Yeah, I'm excited about being here this evening and sharing my part in this whole process. As Nancy mentioned, I'm the founder. I founded a community-based organization about 24 years ago called Change Happens, and that all came from a dream that I had when I was 28 years old. So 30 years ago, I had a dream. And in that dream, I bought some crack houses and I renovated them. And 11 years after that dream, I actually purchased those crack houses. So what has happened in my life, God has driven my life by that dream that I had. And I've been knowing Nancy, God, probably 30 years at least. And when I first got into the field of trying to do something within the community, so Nancy calls me up, I guess 4 years ago, and said, 5 years ago, and said, well, Leslie, I want you to be a part of a process to keep kids out of detention. And I said, Nancy, is that working with them folks down there in the in the county and their probation and juvenile probation? She said, yeah. I said, Nancy, you know how I feel about them folks. I had the position that, first of all, that the probation and the courts didn't care about what I thought and what I felt from the community perspective. And I did all I could to talk to Nancy and tell Nancy I really didn't want to be involved. I don't want anything to do with them folks down there because them folks don't care about what I have to say and what's happening in the community. And what then happened to Tim is Tim been born again. Hallelujah. And I think this whole process was a born again process. That and when you're born again, people take on, first of all, another mindset. You know, he was about, at the time, lock them up, and many folks up there, I thought the same thing. I thought the judges, I just didn't want to go nowhere near. And because they were just sending our kids away, wouldn't listen to the community. But I want you to know the JDAI process actually changed a lot of that. It changed, first of all, the mindset, because what was existing at the time, you had the community thinking, first of all, they don't care about what we say. And not only did we feel as though that there was not any caring about our thoughts and our concerns. We also felt that they didn't want us involved, and we thought that the only thing they wanted to do was preserve their jobs by locking our kids up. Say amen. But so this is what the community was thinking, and so the community kind of stayed away. And so talking to Nancy, I said, okay, Nancy, I'm going to come down there, and I'm going to see what they're talking about. And in the process, guess what? I got born again. I got born again because my mindset began to change because, first of all, they became approachable. And not only were they approachable, they listened. They listened to what this preacher out of Third Ward down in the bottom had to say about this whole process. I was involved with policy change, and I say, oh, I'm on the front end. And they didn't bring me in on the tail end. They brought me on the front end when policies began to change, and we had a change in our chief probation officer. I even had a little input in there, told him what I thought. And my good friend, the county judge, I wrote him a long letter. And he responded back to this long letter what I thought needed to happen in the department. And they went with some of the communities. They went with not some of it. They went with the community's suggestion. And so I got born again saying that they were interested in what we thought needed to happen as far as detaining and our kids that's coming through the system. And not only that, I got to work with the judges, and this is the big thing. The judges started calling. Judge Phillips, I think y'all heard from him last night. I become friends of the judges that's sitting on the bench that has say-so, and other community members have say-so what's happening to our kids, along with Judge Snyder. They began to call the community in, and they asked us, okay, we got this kid, and we wasn't getting paid. Nobody was getting paid for coming down there. They say, we got this kid. We really don't want to detain this kid, but would you come down here and talk to this kid? And we said, absolutely. And the community began to come down and talk to these kids and began to talk to the judges about what we thought was going on with this kid, and would we take some type of responsibility as the community if this kid comes back to our hood. And so this whole process has been a process that has been a very good process, because now you got the county, you got the probation, you got the officers, you got the judges, and you got the community working together for a solution. And the solution is to help our kids, because if we don't help our kids, where will we go? So I put down a lot of stuff. Before, it was anti-community, anti-friendly, anti-understanding, anti-approachable. It was a bunch of anti. But it has changed. And what I see has happened in this whole department and through the JDAI process is that it has caused people like myself, that's activists, that are involved at the community level. Because you know what? These kids coming back to us. And if we're not in the process, so what we did as an organization and as a community, we wrote a grant, and trying to get some support from the county before JDAI. We never would have been able to get any kind of support letter. We didn't even know, we wouldn't even ask for a support letter. But we wrote a grant, and that grant went to the, I believe, it's a federal grant that we have the opportunity to provide mentors within the facilities that we are holding some of these kids in, that mentors will go in before they are released. And this is not at the county expense. Am I right, Tom? Hallelujah. So y'all say amen. It's at the taxpayers' expense, but at our expense. But the county ain't had to come up with nothing but saying, okay, we can go into your facility as a community-based organization And we can bring mentors in here that will work with these kids that once they get released, that will stay with them for 1 year. Now, y'all ought to just be shouting right now. Now, at my church, folks would have been and fell out the chair and said, "Ow!" Y'all sitting here. Oh, Lord, don't. And you know, then they're going to give a preacher 6 minutes. Wait a minute, I'm closing now. Y'all done heard that one, right? So we got the opportunity to provide to these kids mentors. And I think I got one of my staff members out there somewhere. Brandon, where you at? You out there anywhere, Brandon? Hey, there you are, Brandon. If you want to know any more information about what we're doing with those kids and how we are going, and we're not just getting any mentors, we're going downtown. We're getting downtown businessmen and people that are interested in kids that are incarcerated right now, that are getting ready to be released, or right before they get released, they go and we pair them up with a mentor. Because what they gonna need when they get back out here on the streets is somebody to walk with them. See, I had mentors in my life. I'm closing now, y'all. Y'all done heard. Hey. I had mentors in my life. I had some folks all up and down the street that mentored me. There was a lady next door to us called Mama Lou. She was a mentor. Mama Lou had the authority to go and get a limb off the chinaberry tree and just whoop the daylights out of me. And if Mama Lou wasn't there, we had next door to Mama Lou a lady called Momo. And all of these folks mentored my life in some form or fashion. And so because of the JDAI, we've been able to work with the county, work with the judges, and work with the staff to be able to help kids. So now I'm really closing, y'all. In closing, if your community don't have it, you need to talk with John. John in here? John? Yeah. No, okay. You need to talk to Casey. Because it is a born again experience for the community, for the county, for the officers, the judges, and those of us, hallelujah, 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 that work with kids. Thank you.
You all can see why we have so much. We don't have a lick of sense in Harris County, but God Almighty, we have fun. Who wants to follow that?
Oh, really?
Who wants to follow that? Who wants to follow that? Come on up. You want to go, Judge Snyder? Come on, why not? Go, Judge. Judge Michael Schneider, excuse me. Oh, man.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having us again. It's a pleasure to be here. I was asked to do a little bit of a sort of a judicial perspective of how we came to deal with Casey and the solutions they've offered. I don't want to duplicate too much of what's been talked about, but I do want to start back in 2006, the year that we had the probably the worst year for our detention issues, and it happened to be my very first year on the bench. And I had never actually had a lot of juvenile experience before I got on the bench. I was working in the juvenile courts for about 7 years. I was a court chief, but mainly dealt with the CPS cases, the child abuse cases. And as Tom mentioned, when I started, we had about 277 kids, I think was our average daily population. It was absolutely outrageous. I thought we knew we were doing something wrong. We just didn't know what to do. Tom mentioned we had a brand new facility that integrated the courthouse and the detention center. The problem was it was overcrowded from the day we started. What I don't think Tom mentioned was the county had just spent $60 million on this building. When we moved in, it was already broken, at least to that extent. What Tom also didn't mention to you was that when we started looking at the solutions, as he did mention, we were looking at building, either new facilities or working on retrofitting older facilities. And I remember going to Commissioners Court telling them that we needed to look at sort of retrofitting one of the old county jails, and the bid that we got was $90 million. So not only if had we gone that route would we have spent all that money, we would have probably have double the amount of kids, maybe triple the amount of kids that we have now, because we probably would have felt like we did not need to go this route. At the time, we had no large informal deferred program like we do now. Those of you may have heard that our district attorney in 2009 started a program. We have a 90% success rate. We basically have about half the cases filed that were filed when I started in 2006. As Nancy mentioned, one of the issues that we faced was not just an overcrowding in the detention center, but overcrowding in the courts. As has been mentioned, Harris County is the third largest county in the nation, behind LA, behind Cook County. Los Angeles has 60 courts that deal with what we do. Chicago, Cook County, has 32 courts that do what we do. We have 3 courts that do about what Chicago does. Even though they're a larger jurisdiction, we have about the same number of cases filed. So that's kind of what we were dealing with. So my perspective, I guess, is twofold. One, as a judge, and also as a member of the executive committee. One of the things that I think is crucial to our success in Harris County is we got almost everybody on board that you could imagine for our steering committee. We had the county judge, we had ministers, commissioners, chiefs of police, the DA's office. And Harris County, as you may know, I mean, that's really, our reputation is not having social workers and law enforcement on the same page, and we managed to do it. In fact, I really think the only major player that we really haven't gotten to the table is education. And it's a really complex thing in Harris County because we have literally dozens of school districts in our county. But I think that's probably one of the most crucial components that's really helped us do what we've done. Now, if I had to give one phrase for from a judge's perspective, how we have managed to get the numbers we have, it's one phrase: it's trickle down. And what I mean by that is this: as Tim pointed out, we really started out trying to reduce what the big numbers at intake. As a judge, we started to see some slightly smaller numbers, but it's really affected everything from our detention hearings to our trial dispositions, to our certification hearings, which are, in Texas, we call our hearings where the court decides whether to transfer someone to the adult court or to keep them in juvenile court. Our detention hearings years ago were all short, just about. They were just very often a few seconds long. We often had kids who, in fact, literally dozens of kids in a day would sit in detention because their lawyer would hand a waiver that the child had signed outside of the presence of the judge, waiving their hearing, and it was often resubmitted and resubmitted every 10 days. In my court, at least, starting several years ago, once we really got into the Casey program, we banned that. We have no waivers. You get a detention hearing in every single case. Additionally, instead of being necessarily driven by prosecutors or even defense attorneys, in my court, as most of you have seen, in detention hearings, I usually take over because I start out with a presumption that we want the kids home. And that's not even taking some radical approach. If you look at the Texas Family Code, it makes it pretty clear that the presumption is the kids go home. If they're not a flight risk, if they can be managed, they can go home. And it doesn't say in the Texas Family Code that unless it's murder or arson or aggravated robbery, it's for everything. So we really started considering in every type of case, if the supervision was there, the child goes home, all the way up to capital murder, as long as there's that supervision. And one of the ways that having our partners has really helped out is, you know, I've had Leslie, I've had other people from the community show up at detention hearings and saying, with the family, saying, no, we've got a network. We take this seriously. I guarantee you, we will be the detention officers. The kid stays at home, and we do that. And the reason that matters is not just at the detention hearing to get those numbers down, and they have gone down, but I think one of the big effects, and you all heard last night, the number of kids who are going to state facilities from Harris County has gone down 83% since I started. And one of the reasons is, and they've also, the placement at residential facilities has gone down 62%. The reason is, and I'm convinced of this, it used to be when we got to trial, we had so many kids who were detained, we had absolutely no evidence at all that these kids could succeed at home. So what happened months after we got into this program, we actually had some evidence, look, this family can supervise, this kid can stay at home, and so we didn't have to exhaust in the first place the option of residential treatment or out-of-home placement. And typically the kids who were going to the state schools are the ones who had come back after having been placed outside of the home, and we felt, look, the only option is the Texas Youth Commission. And so by the time we got to trial or the plea or whatever, being removed from the home wasn't even on the table in most of these cases. And that's the trickle-down effect that I've seen that's just been amazing. And as I said, it's not just at detention hearings, it's not just in trial cases. When I first started, we probably had about 90 kids certified as adults every year. And it was split pretty evenly among the courts. One of the main reasons was because we would have families, kids come to us after having been in the system for many months. The kids would be in detention, and there was no evidence, just like in the other cases, that they could actually thrive at home or remain in the juvenile system. Last year, and I think this is a record among counties in major jurisdictions, in my court, we certified 3 kids. 3. And all of them were capital murder. And most of the capital murder cases I had were not certified. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that was unthinkable. But that's the trickle-down effect that I'm talking about. It has changed the entire culture of how we approach things within the courts as a result of what we've gone through and what we've seen and how important it is to keep the kids in the communities. We've actually started, in my court, 2 specialty courts. A juvenile drug court, which is the first in Harris County, and the first human trafficking court in the state of Texas, and really the first one of its kind in the country. And they came about because we realized that if you had kids at home from the beginning, monitored them, and made sure that they were accountable, they didn't have to go to institutions. And it worked, and it's continuing to work. So the other reason I think it's worked so well is if you look at the folks here, we just have an outstanding, very diverse group of people who just decided this is going to happen, we're going to do it. Yep. And that's exactly what happened. So that's my take on it. I'd be very willing to chat with anybody afterwards if you have any questions about how we do it, and thank you for being here.
Hey, good job. Sylvia Latapy is the co-chair of, and really the whole person behind our Youth Advisory Council. What else should I do? Oh yeah, you're just a baby. There you go, little one.
Hello, I was asked to speak to you all this evening about JDAI from a juvenile probation officer's perspective. When I first came, I'm a trainer now for the department. When I first came over to Harris County, I was a field officer. And we worked with kids, and when they violated probation, we worked with them, we offered programs, but there was a common theme that let's just lock him up. He's violated probation, just lock him up. And it seemed to be the easy thing to do it sometimes. And through the JDAI initiative, there were probation officers who were working with kids, who were sanctioning them prior to returning them to court. But with the JDAI initiative, we created a formal document, a formal guideline. If a kid violates probation, this is what we do now. This is what the parents have to do, as opposed to just locking them up. It's called the Progressive Sanctions Grid. And it forced probation officers, field officers, because I was out in the field, and field officers didn't like it too much initially, but it really forced probation officers to really work with the kid on probation. It also forced them to start thinking outside the box and start thinking of programs that really met the needs of the kids. But most importantly, it was just something I don't think anybody was anticipating. It forced the parents to start working with the probation department. Because prior to that, their answer would be, just lock them up, just lock them up. Can't you lock them up? Can't you send them away? Because they wanted a reprieve from their child, which was understandable. But you'd start talking to them, you'd say, well, what have you done? What have you done? Have you worked with the department? And a lot of times you found they really hadn't. So most importantly, force the parents to start working with the probation department as well. The other program that I want to talk to you guys about as a probation officer, that it's near and dear to my heart, it's the Youth Advisory Council. I was approached shortly after coming to Harris County by Nancy to co-chair the Youth Advisory Council. And she said, here's our dream, here's what we're thinking. We'd like to get kids who were once on probation, who have successfully completed probation, who are currently successful, and have them come back and talk to and mentor kids currently on probation. And I just remember thinking, wow, what a great idea. And I started a committee. We gathered kids who were currently who had successfully completed probation to come back and start mentoring and talking to kids on probation, and it worked. What we learned is that kids were listening to them. Because I, as a probation officer, couldn't tell you what it's like to grow up in the Third Ward. I can't tell you what it was like to be on probation. But when we had these young men and women who came back and can relate and can talk to them and tell them, look, yeah, I made a mistake too. I was on probation, but it doesn't have to define who you are. And they listened to them, and it worked. And we expanded it to where we started being more preventive as well as a department. We went out into the community. Just this past Saturday, I was at a Baptist church at a girls' conference, and we had our representatives out there, and myself, and we were talking to them, educating them, letting them know about probation and making mistakes. And when you start going on that wrong path, here are the warning signs. And it's been inspiring. It's been educational for the community. It's been educational for the department. It's an incredible program, and if anybody has any questions after this, please, I'd love to answer any questions. It's a great program, and it really does work.
Thanks. Good job. Next is Tarsha Jackson, and let's do it really correctly. Coordinator, Texas Families of Incarcerated Youth, and she is the DMC co-chair. Go, Tarsha.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. As Nancy said, I'm Tarsha Jackson with Texas Families of Incarcerated Youth. And if I was standing before you 10 years from now, I would basically say, I don't like none of these people. Because
10 years ago.
10 years ago. I don't like any of the people. 10 years ago,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have fooled with them. Because I'm a parent that had a kid put on probation at age 10 for a Class C misdemeanor. At age 12, these people, not these people, but, you know, they sent him to the Texas Youth Commission. So I have extensive experience with the criminal juvenile justice system. He went to the Texas Youth Commission at age 12 on a minimum length of stay of 9 months for a Class C misdemeanor. I'm like, this is not right. Something's not right. So, of course, I'm dealing with the state because my son is now on the state level. So I started getting all these parents, meeting these parents in San Antonio and Austin, and we're like, okay, we're getting ready to pass some bills. We're getting ready to, we're going to learn what's going on because they're locking our kids up, and it's not right for minor offenses that we did as children. So eventually, in 2007, of course, we spoke during interim sessions, and I know you heard our senator. He's amazing. He was our #1 ally. We spoke during interim sessions and legislative sessions, and the bill never got passed. And of course, I know you guys heard them talking about the Texas scandal, and that happened in 2007. And of course, I don't like to see people go to jail, but some of the people that I dealt with on the state level, I'm watching them on TV in handcuffs. I'm like, yeah, okay. But then, of course, the agency changed, and Sherry, which is a wonderful, Sherry Townsend, the new, she was the new director of the TYC, so I working closely with her and the parents and other advocates and the legislators trying to reform the system. And I remember sitting there, reading a newspaper titled, Texas Opens Its Doors to Reform. And Bart basically said that he was going to kind of bring Harris County, or something about the toehold of Dallas and Harris County. We're going to reform and get the system stakeholders in the community to work together, and we're going to change the system and stop incarcerating kids that don't need to be incarcerated. I'm like, all right, I'm down with that. I said, who do I need to talk to be a part of this process? Because the families in the community need to be at the table. So I contacted Burns Institute. And of course, they got in contact with Casey, and a week later, Nancy sent me an invitation in March of 2008 and invited me to come and join and attend the fundamentals training. So, okay, I walk up in there, I see all these judges that I was in front of. I was like, oh, but it's cool. It's about the kids. You know, we trying to reform this system. It's about the kids. We trying to make a difference. So, you know, no hard feelings. You know, we was make it work. So, but I started watching them as they started. It was just amazing to see them talking about the reform and really serious about it and trying to get the picture that, hey, all these kids don't need to be locked up. We do need to come up. And Tim was right. They was locking them up. I'm talking about locking them up. I'm coming up with a way to keep our kids in the community. I lost my son, but I was not going to let that happen to anybody else. I said I would devote every day of my life fighting for our kids, our future. Okay, mine is gone, but we still got other kids here that need the help. So, over the years of working with this wonderful crew, Harris County, I can say I like you guys now. They my friends. They have developed so many programs, the creativity and the energy that they put into looking at the data and actually the transparency and just allowing me, a parent, at the table. I mean, that was never heard of, and just really soliciting my advice, want to know, hey, Tarsha, what do we need to do? How can we help? And then Timmy, one of the supervisors of Harris County Probation, he's calling me, hey, Tarsha, we got a workshop. There's going to be parents here. You can come talk to the parents and let them know, they need to, take advantage of the programs we're implementing. And that's what I'm talking about, involving the community, not shutting the door on us, and treating these kids like they're human. I'm saying they my kids. I mean, I might not much know your kids, but your kids are my kids because they're our future. So I want to give a shout out and a great hands to Harris County because this would have never happened in Texas. So thank you guys for all being here, and I love you all. Much love.
Yeah, if you won't move here, we welcome you because we do have you should see us on those site visits. Lord have mercy. But in closing, and thanks to everybody, and thanks for all of you for staying. But when you look at the numbers, the numbers tell the story. Referrals to juvenile probation down 36% in 5 years. Detention admissions, 29% down. Petitions filed, 35%. Youth placed in residential facilities, down 62%. Youth placed in state school, down 83% in Harris County. Certifications, kids transferred to adult court, down 60%. Staff, down 16%. Annual budget, we did get a little bit more, but we're shifting it and how it's being spent. But what's most exciting, and I talked about this in the communication workshop, is we need to tell people our story. Not only would we say some people would say, well, you're letting these kids out and we're now, our color TV is not safe in our home. It's not the case. Murder, down 38%. Auto theft, down, your car's safer, 32%. Unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, down 48%. Felony drugs, down 69%. Burglary, down 23%. So when you look at all the changes, and that really should be 2010 to 11, in Harris County, we totally opened the doors. We threw out everything we had ever been doing, scared to death, saying there's going to be, a rampage on the street of people getting, pillaged, murdered, raped, and terrorized, and the exact opposite has happened. It has truly, we had no idea what the results would be. We just knew we had to do the right thing, and the results tell the story. So we couldn't be more proud, and it really is exciting what we've done, and we will share our stories with anyone who has any questions. We have probably seen it, some of the difficulties. So thank you all very much for being here, and I think that is it. That's a wrap.